In secret bunkers and hidden laboratories, Hitler's engineers were on the verge of breakthroughs that would have made D-Day impossible, and a swastika over the White House a terrifying possibility. While the world was fighting with propeller planes, Nazi Germany was pouring billions into a shadow war of technology, creating weapons so far ahead of their time, they feel like a conspiracy theory, but they weren't. Forget better tanks, we're talking about intercontinental bombers designed to nuke New York City, rocket-powered interceptors that flew faster than a bullet, and a land battleship so massive it would have had its own postcode. These are some of the most terrifyingly advanced Nazi weapons that were just a few screws and bolts away from becoming a reality. First up, a jet so futuristic, its design is still used in modern stealth aircraft today. Okay, it's 1944. The American B-2 stealth bomber, that iconic black triangle, is still decades away from its first flight. Yet, in a secret hangar in Germany, the Horten brothers are staring at something that looks eerily similar. You could barely even call this a plane. It was more like a ghost. The Horten Ho 229 was a jet-powered flying wing designed to be virtually invisible to Allied radar. How is that even possible? Well, the Horten brothers were aeronautical geniuses, even if they were working for the wrong side. They realized that by getting rid of the tail and fuselage, they could dramatically reduce the radar cross-section. The final design was a smooth, bat-like wing made mostly of wood. They even planned to mix charcoal dust in with the glue, which, get this, would have absorbed electromagnetic waves from radar systems. This was basically stealth technology before anyone had even coined the term. This wasn't just a blueprint either, they actually built and flew a prototype. It was powered by 2 jet engines, could fly at nearly 600 miles per hour, and was designed to carry a devastating payload of cannons and bombs. Imagine you're an Allied radar operator in 1945 staring at your screen, and suddenly a squadron of these alien-looking fighters appears out of nowhere over London or Moscow. You wouldn't stand a chance. The war would have been turned on its head. Luckily for the Allies, the project was plagued by problems. The prototype crashed, killing its test pilot, and the war ended before they could perfect the design. The Americans captured the only surviving prototype, and it sits in a museum to this day, a silent testament to how terrifyingly ahead of their time Nazi engineers really were. But as crazy as a 1940s stealth bomber sounds, it's a toy compared to what's coming later. I'm talking about a top secret project so crazy it sounds like it was ripped from a sci-fi novel. It was codenamed Die Glocke, or the Bell, and trust me, you will not want to miss it. Long before the world ever heard of laser-guided missiles, Nazi Germany had the Fritz X. This thing was the grandfather of all smart bombs. Seriously, it was a 3,400-pound armor-piercing bomb with a brain. Well, sort of. The Fritz X was fitted with a radio receiver and spoilers on its tail fins. An operator in the bomber plane would drop the bomb and then guide it to its target using a joystick. A flare in the bomb's tail allowed them to track its descent and make tiny adjustments, steering it directly into the deck of an enemy ship. It was a terrifyingly effective weapon of precision. In 1943, they put it to the test. The Italian battleship Roma, one of the most powerful warships in the world, was hit by 2 of these. They punched right through its deck and detonated in the ship's magazine. The resulting explosion was so massive, it split the battleship in half. Just like that, a technological titan was sent to the bottom of the ocean by a guy with a joystick. Fighting in the dead of night has always been a soldier's worst nightmare. You can't see your hand in front of your face, let alone the enemy. The Nazis decided to solve this problem by literally giving their soldiers the eyes of a vampire. They called it the Zielgerät 1229, codenamed Vampire. This was one of the world's first active infrared night vision systems designed for individual soldiers. It consisted of a bulky infrared scope mounted on an STG-44 assault rifle, connected by a cable to a heavy battery pack the soldier had to wear on his back. It was clunky, it was heavy, and the battery only lasted for about 15 minutes. But for those 15 minutes, you were a god of the night. While Allied soldiers were stumbling in the dark, a German sniper with a vampire scope could see them clear as day. And if you want to make sure you're never left in the dark on stories like this, hitting that subscribe button is basically your own personal night vision scope. The system illuminated the battlefield with an invisible infrared light, turning the pitch black night into a glowing, ghostly landscape on their scope. Only a few hundred were ever made, but can you imagine the sheer psychological terror of being hunted by soldiers who could see in the dark? Today, we're used to the idea of long-range missiles, but in the 1940s, it was pure science fiction. That is, until Germany unleashed its vengeance weapons, the V1 and V2. These things were more than just weapons. They were instruments designed for pure psychological terror. The V1 was basically the world's first cruise missile. It was a flying bomb powered by a crude pulse jet engine that gave it a terrifying buzzing sound, earning it the nickname Buzz Bomb. It would fly over London until its fuel ran out, the engine would cut, and in the chilling silence that followed, it would fall to earth and explode. The silence before the impact was almost as terrifying as the explosion itself. But the V2 was the real nightmare. This was the world's first long-range ballistic missile. Designed by Wernher von Braun, yes, the same guy who later sent Americans to the moon, the V2 was a 46-foot-tall rocket that could travel at supersonic speeds. It would launch from mainland Europe, fly to the edge of space, and then come screaming down on its target faster than the speed of sound. You couldn't shoot it down, you couldn't even hear it coming. The first you'd know about a V2 attack was the massive explosion that leveled city blocks. It was the ultimate weapon of indiscriminate fear. If they had managed to arm these things with nuclear material, the world we know today would not exist. But even these terror weapons were grounded in reality. The Nazis' ambition, however, was literally reaching for the stars with a plan for an orbital death ray that could boil oceans. We'll get to that particular brand of madness near the end, but first, let's look at a weapon so reckless it killed more of its own pilots than the enemy. There are brilliant ideas, and then there are brilliantly insane ideas. The Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet falls squarely into the second category. This was the only rocket-powered fighter aircraft to ever see combat, and it was basically a manned missile with a death wish. The Comet was designed to be an interceptor. It would use its incredible rocket engine to climb to 30,000 feet in under 3 minutes, a feat that no propeller plane could even dream of. It would then dive on Allied bomber formations, firing its cannons before gliding back to base. Sounds great, right? Wrong. The fuel was a hypergolic mixture of two chemicals that would spontaneously explode if they ever came into contact with each other. And they often did. More comets were lost to accidents than to enemy fire. The fuel was so corrosive, it could dissolve the pilot. Taking off was a nightmare. Landing was a nightmare. And you only had about 6 minutes of powered flight. It was less of an airplane and more of a ridiculously fast, explosive coffin. So on one hand, you have the fastest, most unstable aircraft imaginable, but at the exact same time, Nazi engineers were also going in the complete opposite direction, designing the slowest, most ridiculously massive weapon you could possibly build on land. Every once in a while, a military project comes along that is so over the top, so ridiculously ambitious, you have to wonder what they were smoking in the design meetings. Meet the Land Cruiser P-1000. Nicknamed the Rat, or Rat. Calling this thing a tank would be an insult. It was a literal land battleship. The Rat was designed to be a 1,000-ton behemoth, 5 times heavier than the heaviest tank ever built. Its main weapon was going to be a dual naval cannon turret, the same kind used on German battleships. For anti-aircraft defense, it had multiple flak cannons. For anti-personnel defense, it had machine guns. It was designed to have a crew of over 20 people and was so big it would have had its own internal medical bay and bathroom. It was the ultimate expression of bigger is better. But in reality, it was a logistical nightmare. No bridge could support its weight. It would have moved at a snail's pace, making it an easy target for bombers. It would have consumed so much fuel that it would have crippled the German war machine, just by existing. What do you guys think? Would this thing have been a game changer or just the world's biggest target? Let me know down in the comments. The project was thankfully canceled before a prototype could be built. By 1942, the Nazis were dominating Europe, but America felt safe, protected by the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Hitler wanted to shatter that sense of security. He wanted a bomber that could fly from Germany, drop a payload on New York City, and fly back. Thus, the America Bomber Project was born. This was an incredible technological challenge. It required a plane with an insane range of thousands of miles, capable of carrying a massive bomb load. Several companies submitted designs, including the Horton brothers with another flying wing concept, and Messerschmitt with a 6-engine behemoth. These were designed as intercontinental weapons platforms, but here's where it gets truly terrifying. As the war progressed, German scientists were also working on their own nuclear program. The plan for the America bomber went far beyond dropping conventional explosives. Its ultimate purpose was to deliver an atomic bomb right onto Manhattan. Think about that for a second. A silent, high-altitude bomber appearing over New York City, not with bombs, but with a nuclear device. The war would have ended, but not in the way we know. Thankfully, both the bomber and the bomb projects were never completed. The Atlantic Ocean remained a barrier they just couldn't cross.
If the Me-163 Comet was a suicide sled, the Bochem Ba-349 Natter, or Viper, was something even crazier. A disposable, vertically launched interceptor. It was basically a wooden missile with a pilot crammed inside. The idea was to create a cheap, easy-to-produce point defense weapon that could be launched from anywhere. When Allied bombers were detected, the pilot would be strapped into the Natter, which was mounted on a launch tower. It would blast off vertically, like a space rocket, straight into the bomber formation. The pilot's only job was to aim the Natter and fire its entire nose cone, which was packed with unguided rockets, into the lead bomber. After firing, the aircraft would literally break apart in mid-air. The pilot and the rocket motor section would be ejected to parachute back to Earth, while the rest of the wooden airframe just fell apart. It was a one-way trip for the plane and very nearly a one-way trip for the pilot. It was a weapon of pure desperation. Alright, everything we've talked about so far has been, for the most part, documented military history. Now we're going off the deep end. We're entering the world of conspiracies, rumors, and a device so strange it defies all conventional explanation. Let's talk about Die Glock. The Bell. According to unsubstantiated claims from a Polish journalist, deep in a secret underground facility in Poland, the SS weren't building a plane, a bomb, or a tank. Instead, they were constructing a massive, heavy, bell-shaped object, about 9 feet wide and 15 feet tall. It was made of a hard, heavy metal and was filled with 2 counter-rotating cylinders containing a violent, mercury-like substance codenamed Zerum 525. When activated, the bell supposedly emitted a strong, pale blue light and a buzzing or humming sound. The alleged effects were horrifying. Scientists involved in the project reportedly suffered from nerve damage, sleep problems, and even death after exposure. The area around the bell was said to cause the crystallization of animal tissues and the decay of plant life. But what was its purpose? Here's where it gets wild. Theories range from it being a powerful new type of weapon, to an anti-gravity engine for a new generation of UFO-like aircraft, to the most outlandish theory of all, a time machine. So what do you believe? Was Die Glock a super weapon, an anti-gravity engine, or something else entirely? Proponents of this theory claim the Nazis were trying to bend space-time itself, perhaps to see the future or change the past. There's no concrete proof, no wreckage, only whispered stories and third-hand accounts. But at the end of the war, the general in charge of the project was executed, and the bell, along with all the scientists who worked on it, vanished without a trace. Just when you think Nazi weapon concepts couldn't get any more insane, they decide to try and weaponize the sun. I am not joking. They called it the Sonnengewehr, which translates to the sun gun. This was a theoretical orbital weapon that would have been the ultimate super weapon. The concept was originally proposed by a German physicist back in 1929, but the Nazis picked it up during the war and ran with it. The plan was to put a massive 3.5 square mile concave mirror into orbit around the Earth. This giant mirror would be made of metallic sodium and would be assembled by astronauts in a manned space station. Its purpose was simple and terrifying. The mirror would be used to collect and focus sunlight onto a specific point on the Earth's surface. It would essentially be a giant magnifying glass in space, capable of boiling oceans, incinerating cities, and melting armies in an instant. It was a death ray on a planetary scale. The sheer level of ambition is mind-boggling. Building a space station in the 1940s, constructing a mirror the size of a city in orbit, it was pure, unfiltered megalomania, and it represents the terrifying endpoint of their ambition. They didn't just want to conquer the world, they wanted the power to destroy it from the heavens. But these weapons were just one piece of a much darker puzzle, because for every secret weapon they designed, there were horrifying medical experiments and grim discoveries being made in the shadows. So click this video right here, because as terrifying as these weapons were, the scientific discoveries they made behind the scenes are somehow even worse.